Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we have another book review as per usual because these are the most common and the ones that do the best. And we have, as you can see, the book of today is the Ikessar Falcon by Ikessar Villoso. Before we jump into the review, let's just go through housekeeping. You know what to do. If you're new, subscribe, like the content. And if you're not new, but you've read these books, just comment down below. Let me know what you think about it before I start my review. For those that don't know, the Ikessar Falcon is the second book of a trilogy. The trilogy is called The Chronicles of the Wolf Queen. It might also be found as The Chronicles of the Bee Queen. And I'm not going to say this here because YouTube guidelines, but you can also look through that and you will find this trilogy. The first book was reviewed here on the channel and you can see it by looking for this thumbnail or by clicking on the card that should be around at the top, and go first watch that if you want to have a feel of what I thought about the first book, because I will be referencing it here so you'll have a better understanding. But in regards to the second book, this book, The Ikessar Falcon, was published not too long ago, 2018. It has on Goodreads only 1,000 ratings, which I think is quite low for a book that was published 6 years ago of the filming of this video. And the score it has is a 4.01. So it's quite a good score, especially having so few ratings, because that can make it more volatile, but it's still quite positive. It's above 4, even if it's just for a little bit, but it's still above 4. So it seems that even though this trilogy doesn't have many fans, the fans that exist really enjoy this trilogy, or at least the first book, or the second book, I mean. For the curious ones, you know what I do. I'm going to read you the synopsis, but if you don't want to hear anything about it, you don't want to be spoiled, especially because this is the second book of a trilogy, then just skip to the timestamp. It's floating around and you'll jump right into the review. Otherwise, stick around and enjoy the reading. The spiral to madness begins with a single push. Abandoned by her people, Queen Talian's quest takes a turn for the worst as she stumbles upon a plot deeper and more sinister than she could have ever imagined. One that will displace her king and see her son dead. The road home beckons, strewn with a tangled web of deceit and impossible horrors that unearth the nation's true troubles. Creatures from the dark, mad dragons, and men with hearts hungry for power. To save her land, Talian must confront the myth others have built around her. Warlord Yashin's daughter, symbol of peace, warrior and queen, and everything she could never be. The price of failure is steep. Her friends are few. And a nation carved by a murderer can only be destined for war. Alright, we're back, and before we jump into the categories, just a refresher for the first book. If you haven't seen the video, or if you don't remember because you've seen it long ago, these are the scores I gave for the first book. So as you can see, for me, it was just positive because, I consider above 2.5 positive, since 2.5 is the average. And so it was just positive. I felt there were a couple of things that I didn't really vibe with me. Some people might enjoy it, but not really my style. Most of the categories, as you can see, were hovering between 2 and 3. But yeah, let's see how the second book does in comparison to this. Starting with our precious plot, one of my main criticisms about the first book was that the plot felt very repetitive. It was the same situation but with a different background. So we would see the main character always having to go through the same thing over and over again, and always being safe, never suffering from it, and the scenario would be the thing that would change. But even then, it would all be set up in very similar places. And I didn't really like that, but luckily in this book, it kind of changed. At least it wasn't repetitive, but the plot wasn't really that good either. I felt like throughout the book, the stakes weren't high, and that's because the plot was extremely predictable. Our character, our main protagonist, is constantly in death risk situations and very perilous, but we know that she will always survive because she is the main character, and this is not the type of book like a Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, I might say, by George Martin. We know that this character will reach the end of the trilogy. So all these situations where she's almost dying, we know that something will come up and she will be saved. And most of these situations really feel a bit like Deus Ex Machina, in the sense that suddenly something miraculous happens and she is saved most of the times. There's not a logical or at least a built up solution for the problems that she faces. So this also makes the main character seem to have a huge plot armor, because even though the plot is changing and she is being faced with different situations, she never suffers from it. So she's impossible to kill, pretty much. So for this category, even though I applaud the author for changing the plot structure and making it more diverse, for me it still didn't work very well, so I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. Moving on to characters, I also mentioned in the first book that on the review of the first book that the characters felt like they were written for a YA genre instead of an adult fantasy. And I think this became more exacerbated in this book because, and that's partially, this is a category that is very mixed with writing style, and because of that, I will be talking a lot about both. But I feel like the writing style of the characters felt like they were super extreme. They couldn't have normal emotions per se. They would go from one extreme to the other extreme, and the characters themselves didn't feel consistent with how they were in the first book. And I know that the characters are going through a lot of different situations. They could change, but these changes occur so suddenly and so extremely to the opposite that they don't feel consistent, that they don't feel coherent, let's say. So unfortunately for me, this category will also be a 2 out of 5. And again, this might be just a preference from me, because for me, I like my characters to have a more smooth nuances of emotions, and for if there are extremes, for them to be built up and not always be at the top of extreme, and it just changes from extreme to extreme. It never has ups and downs, or like smooth up and downs, let's say. Now moving on to world building. World building was my favorite category for this book. And that's because in the first book, my main criticism was that we were very stuck in cities, and that was the only scenario we had in this world where we see several countries, or we're supposed to see several countries because they are acting upon the plot, but we would always hear about them, not really see them. And this was solved in this book, where there was more exploration. The characters were going through these different countries, figuring out their landscapes, their dynamics, politics, all of this, culture even, and therefore it was like we were exploring the world with the characters. And that I enjoyed. I think there were several good parts from the author, several good ideas in terms of world building, how the world is built and what is happening to it. And yeah, I have to give points for that. Also, the more fantastical points of this book are now more prevalent in the series, let's say, because in the first one they were again very briefly mentioned, or they would be in an interlude, something like that, but now they are more present, and I also enjoy that. I think that gives it more like excitement, let's say. I really hope that this category stays like that for this book and for the next one, I mean, but for now I'm gonna give this category a 4 out of 5. Next we have writing style, and regarding this category, woof, it was rough, let's say. Like I said, part of it was the characters. They felt extremely extreme and very YA in a book that was supposed to be adult considering the themes that is dealing with. But then there was also problems of pacing that it felt very confusing. We were suddenly going very fast, suddenly going very slow. There was action, but it was broken apart. There was a lot of inconsistencies in the prose and the pacing. And I think one of the worst things were there were a lot of idiosyncrasies where it would be very jarring. I would be reading and I would be completely taken out because those sentences didn't feel like they belonged in a fantastical world at all, or they could truly be put from, I don't know, some magazine or some newspaper that you see and put in that book. And I don't really enjoy that. I don't know if that's because the author is new and is still honing their skills, but yeah, that was not for me. I completely understand that this might be someone else's cup of tea, and I applaud them for that. I think that if this is your favorite author, go for that, support them, because we all need to support different authors and they deserve, I mean, they are accomplished. They publish these books, so good for them. What I hope is that the third book has a slightly better writing style, at least going back to the first one where it wasn't so extreme, but let's see how we go. For now, this category is a 1 out of 5. Now for our last category, which is enjoyment. I did not enjoy this book that much, as you can probably guess. The plot was bearable and the world building was a positive. That was the thing that kept me going, but the characters and the writing style were really make me struggle to read this. I think, like I said, what saved this book from a DNF was really the world building, because it got me curious to know about the world building, even though I didn't care about the characters and what they were going through, but at least I felt like, ooh, dragons, ooh, magic, let's go for that. So there were moments where it was all just about the characters. They were in the city and I would have to force myself to read this part just so that I could get into a bit more exploring. So that was all of that. And because of that, my enjoyment was a 2 out of 5. But so we reached the end of our review. Just so you can refresh the scores I gave, it was a 2 for plot, 2 for characters, 4 for world building, 1 for writing style, and 2 for enjoyment. And that gives us a total score of 2.2 out of 5. So as you can see, this book declined in quality for me, but I think it now becomes on the negative scale, and it's a book that I would not recommend people to read it. And maybe it's just a middle book syndrome. Maybe the third book will surprise me. I mean, I've been proven wrong many times that just because the second book is worse than the first one doesn't mean that the third one will also be worse. It can be much better and it can blow your mind. I'm not really expecting this one to do that, but who knows? When you least expect is when it happens. I also don't really understand how this book got a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. I see it, but I mean, everyone to each own, right? Fans will enjoy it, they will give 5 stars, and good for them. I hope they continue enjoying a lot more than Villoso writes. I will read the third one for this trilogy, but I'm not sure I will read anything else from this author. But now I want to hear from you. Have you read this book? What do you think? Are you one of the people that have given a score of 4 or above? Please tell me why you think so. I'm really curious to hear other opinions. And if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and you'll be seeing me on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? Alright, see you soon. Cheers.